Hello, welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched. I'm your host, the Social Solipsist, and this week I watched Velvet Buzzsaw from 2019. Oh, how do we talk about Velvet Buzzsaw? What a name. Velvet Buzzsaw, a horror film from 2019 that I could have sworn was older than that actually, but obviously I think for all of us the last couple of years have been a bit of a weird time dilation period, so who knows. Anyway, I've been meaning to watch it for what seems like a long time, but is not as long as I thought. This is directed and written by Dan Gilroy, who I have not watched anything else from before, although apparently he has been in the industry for quite a long time, though mostly as a writer. His directorial debut was actually in 2014 with Nightcrawler, which I've also been intending to watch for a long time. But after what I just watched, I'm not sure how I feel about that. Now, don't get me wrong. Velvet Buzzsaw is not an awful film. But it's got a lot of problems. I like the concept. I like a lot of what's going on with it. I don't like a lot of its execution. It's hard to talk about this film without talking about the sort of the core premise. And even though it's fairly obvious and fairly simple, I'm going to hold off until a later part of the video where I'm going to bookend the spoiler-free part and go into the more spoilery part. Not full spoiler, but I'm going to try and moderate it there. So I'll give you a heads up when we get there. Let's talk about the film in a outside of the spoilers part of it. There's a lot I like in the cinematography. It's not really incredible. There are no truly there's no really great cinematography, but there's definitely some moments and even whole scenes that I think are done with enough sort of interesting camera work and mostly in conjunction with the other elements of cinema, music, acting, lighting, all these other things. It works well. And so it takes a little bit of, it takes some artistic risks in the cinematography department that I think often pay off. That said, there's enough sort of there's enough scenes that are shot in sort of just not even odd ways, but just seem kind of amateurish, like they weren't quite that polished, that I can't give it an across the board, oh, this film looks great. But there's some good stuff in there that I did like. There's some aspects of the visuals I do like. To that same end, there's some interesting camera tricks, both done in camera and in post-production, that I think are really well done and interestingly done. Some interesting choices there. There's also some bad ones, some artistic choices in post-production that I don't agree with. And some of those tie further into deeper elements of the story that I don't like it so much. But some of them are really well done. As far as the characters and the actors and the dialogue goes, this is an ensemble cast with a number of notable names, not like real A-listers, but people who have substantial careers and are notable names, and some smaller actors who are also, I think, do very well with what they're given. Unfortunately, what they're given is a little bit of a mixed bag, so you take what you can get. Jake Gyllenhaal, Rene Russo, Toni Collette, Natalia Dyer, Daveed Diggs, who we saw in what was the name? Shit, this is gonna bother me if I don't go look it up. Hold on. Blind Spotting, I think. I think that was it. Yeah. And John Malkovich. All, you know, it's an ensemble cast. They all have relatively small roles, but I think when they're given good content to work with, they do really well. They're all talented actors. Jake Gyllenhaal in particular, I am a big fan of, and despite his general acclaim, I still think he's an underrated actor. But that's not to say his performance is perfect in this either. I don't really blame him though. I mostly blame the dialogue and the script. But we'll get a little bit more into that. The overall plot is a real hash job, because the setup, I think, is where the film really shines. The point where during the first act of the film, I was really hooked, and I thought I was going to love this film. It had like little niggles as I was watching, where I was like, oh, is that going to be okay? But they mostly sort of went by the wayside, and I didn't think about them until a certain point in the film, when I knew things were in trouble. So yeah, I don't know how much else I can say without talking more about it. Again, well, I'm gonna sort of make a marker here and say I don't really like this film, but it's not without merit. If you're just sort of up for a what is this even? It's billed as being satirical, but it's not really, and so I can't even really point you that way if that's what you're looking for. It's not very good, but it's got enough interesting elements and interesting performances that it wouldn't be an entire waste of your time if you did watch it. So, I'm sort of going to make a marker here and say I'm not going to go into like full-on spoilers, but I'm going to discuss the plot a little bit in a roundabout way. So, caveat emptor: you're not buying this shit; it's free. So from here on, you've been warned. All right. So the premise of the film is that one of the characters found some art, and the art is cursed, basically. Problem number one, they never really get into what it is. It's manifests throughout the film as just sort of, it's not even really possible to know whether it's literal or figurative. It seems to be very literal, but trying to assess or even question at the very basic level what this thing is, or why, even the very basic why it is after people, is sort of unclear. If you've watched it, you know that they, like, basically all they give you is that the artist wanted his art destroyed, and that's sort of where the exploration ends. The art was not destroyed. The artist may or may not have thought that it was, or known that it was cursed. There's like some backstory elements that talk about the history of the artist as they're exploring it, but none of that is actually, it's only used for flavor. It's not used for anything meaningful about the overall arc. So it's kind of a wash in the end. what I was talking about before with the first chunk of the movie, I think being really good, is that the first chunk of the movie where there are not really any horror elements, the movie does an excellent job of giving you this sort of sense of unease. Like, I was really, really impressed at how characters were written and were performed, and the interplay between characters sort of gave you a grander scope of both the interpersonal relationships between individuals and within the art community, the larger like art sellers community in LA or whatever, this microcosm of a microcosm, and how that sort of with a lot of showing and not a lot of telling, sort of informed the viewer's understanding and vision of and feelings on the various characters and the setting in general. So when the art is discovered at what I would argue is the beginning of Act 2, and starts to circulate, that is sort of the beginning of the end for the film. Though the one thing that I think happens prior, no, it happens after. No, it happens prior. There's one moment that was a sign that I saw but ignored, which is there is an art piece, and again, I'm not going to get into the specifics even. There's an art piece shown at an exhibition at the very beginning of the film where you look at the thing and as a movie viewer who has some sense of the movie they're going into, you immediately go, oh, I know exactly what the fuck that thing's going to be. Like, I know how it's going to play out. It's not going to play out, it turns out, for another, like, hour and a half. And it's pretty limp. But it's like, oh, this is the real, like, hitting you over the head, unsubtle kind of work that's going on in the writing here. That object should have told me everything I needed to know about how the remainder of the film was going to go. I ignored it, and I was tricked. So you get this section at the beginning when they're having this exploration of these characters, and then suddenly it becomes, I don't know, it's trying to be two things at once, and they're not melding at all. Where it continues to be an exploration of the characters, except for suddenly, after the end of the first act, the characters are much less well written and are very confused about how they're supposed to interact with each other, and the dynamics are much less clear, or even complex. They're not even very complex anymore. And simultaneously, they add this addition of what's essentially a slasher film that just sort of interjects itself at random points for horror, which is really what bummed me out, is that this devolved into like kind of a cheesy slasher film, complete with like a bunch of bad cinematic tropes, like lighting and music cues and these other things that are like, man, this is cliche as hell. And so I was completely missing what I had been enjoying in the first part of the film, while simultaneously thinking, boy, if I wish this film were worse. I wish it were cheesier. I wish it was satire, but it doesn't really feel like it is still satirical, in the sense of satirizing, the art world. which I don't know much about, but I know a little bit, and it's just, yeah, I mean, well deserving of ridicule. So it's a satire in that sense, but it doesn't have a satirical feeling to it. There's no absurdity really present. It's played very straight. And then it's just interspersed with these like kill scenes. And you just sort of wonder why. I had really been hoping from the first part of the movie that this was going to be a very like mental horror film in terms of not necessarily being as on the nose of like, oh, people in the art sale world and critics suddenly are having to grapple with the like being forced to grapple with the social ramifications of their actions and made to feel bad by an external entity about how they conduct themselves. Like that's sort of the overarching thing I expected, but I was expecting more of an introspective aspect to that with the characters, sort of rather than conflicting with an external source, have the external thing, the art, be a catalyst for sort of additional strife, interpersonal conflict, and things like that. And it didn't do any of that really. By 15 minutes after the art is discovered, it is all devolved into like very trite story beats of money is splitting people up and making people angry, and they're all competitive and they're not learning their lesson, and then they get killed, or something happens to them or whatever. And it's boring. It's boring, and it's not even amusing, and the characters have not been fleshed out or given enough motivations of their own or enough characterization of their own for you to feel really invested in either rooting for them to be punished or rooting for them to escape punishment. There's not enough depth in there in the preceding or continuing exploration of the characters to really get a like meaningful outcome from the like very tropified horror aspects that follow. So if you have watched this film, or if you're going to watch it, leave me your thoughts. I don't hate this. I do think it's kind of bad. And as far as watching Nightcrawler, maybe I'll just do that next week's video, or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe I'll do it as a video. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll report back separately and let you guys know how that one goes. But yeah, I wanted to like this film. I liked it for a while, right up until I didn't. Anyway, thank you guys for watching another episode of Solipsist Watched. I've been the Social Solipsist, and I'll see you guys next time.